There's Huff.
Hi, guys. Hey.
Restroom, like usual.
Thank you, Ariel, because I did not remember to repress that. So now I am recording, but thankfully I think majority of what I just went over was review from last week. So hopefully. Thanks, Ariel. I appreciate you because I would have completely forgotten to do that. All right. Recording now. All right, so most epithelial cells are innervated, meaning that they do have nerve supply. Well, let's think about this for a minute. One of our largest epithelial organs is our skin. It is the largest organ package in our entire body. And its primary job, one of its primary jobs, it's got a lot of jobs. One of its primary jobs is sensory, to transmit messages to there was a fly, to my brain in regards to my environment. And I need to have a massive amount of innervation or nerve supply in order to do that. All right, so these are the 3 different ways that I can join epithelial cells together. I can join them together in a junction called a desmosome. Now, what a desmosome is very tough. It's going to resist tension and stretching. It almost looks interlocked like Velcro, where it's going to be very, very tough. It's not going to be very elastic. You're not going to have a lot of stretch. Where we're going to see this is in the skin. Yes, your skin has some capacity for stretch, but we really want to limit that because you can damage the underlying tissue. The heart, of course we want to limit the amount of stretch in the heart. We don't want this loosey-goosey balloon heart that's just this big bowl of jiggling jello. The next type of junction is like a gap junction. And luckily the next 2 do exactly what they sound like. Gap junction is going to have a gap. And what this is going to do is allow molecules to move easily back and forth through. Things like ions, nutrients. We have one nutrient that is called glucose. It's a sugar and it's humongous. When we compare it to other molecules, glucose is humongous. And so what we're going to need is a little gap in between these cells so that our glucose can enter the tissue, nourish, and not destroy anything. We're also going to see tight junctions. And again, they do exactly what they sound like. They're going to be very tightly bound together. And these are the junctions that are going to form a waterproof barrier, like in your bladder or like in your GI tract. Areas that we do not want to have any kind of leakage. So desmosome, this is going to be like Velcro. It's going to resist stretching. Gap junction is just that. We have a gap in between, allowing the exchange of nutrients, etc. Tight junction, waterproof, not letting anything in or out. So here we have a picture. Here we have our tight junction. Here we have our gap junction and our desmosome, which is going to be more like this Velcro looking junction. All of our epithelial cells originate from what we call the basement membrane. Now, here in Texas, you guys don't have basements, which is a shame because they're fabulous. When I lived in Canada, my bedroom was actually in the basement. The whole house originates from the basement, and that's the exact same thing that's happening here with our epithelial cells. They're originating at this foundation. And as the foundation produces more and more and more, depending on the structure, this is going to move all of the old cells up. When the top layer of cells sloughs off, we got another layer of cells right behind it to take its place. So it's this basement membrane that is going to control the thickness. Now think about our outer epithelial cells. Think about the skin on the bottom of your foot versus the skin on your eyelid. Very different thicknesses, thank goodness, because that would be disgusting. And we can control the thickness of our epithelium that over time. Exposure to our environment can cause our epithelial membrane, our basement membrane, to produce even more layers. Think about this. So if you are a guitar player and you are constantly shearing off the layer of epithelium on your fingertips, we call it worry. Like, yes, I am so worried about this test. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. You are worrying the area. Well, what's going to happen in response is your body's going to start producing thicker and thicker and thicker layers to protect the underlying tissue. It's what we call a callus. So if we need to increase the barrier, our epithelial tissue does have the ability to do this. Here is a picture of the basement membrane. This happens to be a histological slide of our trachea. So what I'm following right here is the basement membrane, and then we have cells originating, pushing up, pushing up, pushing up. Now, some of these cells in the epithelium have a specialized surface, and we've already talked about this. We've already talked about these specialized surfaces. Some of these cells are going to have what we call microvilli. And I think this is where I actually started thinking and talking about Chinese food in the last class. Where we see a great example of this microvilli on these cells, and microvilli is just a ziggy-zaggy. Instead of having a nice smooth cell membrane, we got a ziggy-zaggy. And what that's going to do is increase the surface area dramatically. Why do I want to do this? Well, one of the areas is in my small intestine. Why? The job of your small intestine is to break down nutrients. This is exactly where I got this Chinese food. Because I said Chipotle, and then we had this whole argument about, no, I don't want Chipotle, I want this, and when I love to do this, and then somebody said Chinese food, and then I latched onto that like a drowning man. So you're eating your I know, I got very excited about this idea for Chinese food. So you're eating your delicious Chinese food. Don't you say a word, Kadeem, because I will mute you forever. I will hunt you down. I will mute you forever. Chinese food is delicious, and I'm totally getting it today. Got anything to say? Oh, yeah. I'm gonna say you need to reconsider about unmuting yourself. So. Oh my goodness. Okay. Chinese food. No, my whole point is, though, the job of your small intestines is to break apart nutrients. We need to break apart the Legos. But the other thing that your intestines do is they upload those nutrients that have now been broken down to the most basic molecular structure, and they upload that into the blood. And then that takes them to the liver, where they get converted into usable energy. The liver is kind of like the bank of the body. By having this enlarged surface area, it's much easier for my body to absorb these nutrients. So it's this specialized epithelial surface that allows me to have this increased surface area. And if I do have that, the medical term for that is known as microvilli. Some other specialized surfaces, keratin, fingernails, horns, antlers. Here I got a picture for my little visual learners. Here you can see this is a microvilli, and even the cells that make up these microvilli are folded to increase the surface area. In fact, there is a virus, not the virus that we're all dealing with right now, but we have what's called the parvovirus that attacks young, generally immunocompromised puppies. And what that immunovirus does is it attacks the microvilli of the intestines and causes them to slough or come out. And what happens is the animal starts having just massive bloody diarrhea and vomit, and they can't absorb any nutrients because they don't have this lining in their intestines. And that's actually what's going to kill them. So parvovirus is very, very dangerous, and this is what it is affecting. We also have other specialized surfaces like cilia. We've talked about this, moves like a sea anemone. It's going to be like a crowd surf. We see this very commonly in our lung cells. We also have specialized epithelial cells called goblet cells. And I'm pretty certain, I'm not sure if I gave you guys the analogy of how to remember a goblet cell. So Game of Thrones, little known show, great binge. Last season sucked, just saying. But everybody on the show, if you imagine that I am like Cersei or whoever, I mean, because honestly, they were all terrible in the end. It doesn't matter. So they all drink out of these very ornate goblets, these very ornate golden goblets. Except in my goblet, I don't have wine. I have chunky lung butter. I have mucus that has got the chunks that, though the good one, you know, in the morning where you spend like half an hour hacking it up, and then you spit it into the sink, and it just sits there like a slug. And you turn the faucet on, and it doesn't even wash it down the faucet. You got to sit with your finger and
nice
poke it.
loogie.
That is a great loogie. My goblet is filled with that.
Especially when you got to go.
Oh, Kadeem, you're muted, dude. Oh, muted. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was so terrible. That was so awful. So we're not going to stop that now. Anyway, goblet cell produces mucus. I think that was what I was just trying to help you remember. And Kadeem, now with that really great earworm image, we will never forget it as long as we live. All right, so this is a really beautiful picture. This is a film of a single lung cell, just kind of showing, you can see out here microscopically some of those cilia that are on that specific lung cell. So when we're talking about epithelial cells, we have different configurations. We have, how many layers of cells do we have? If we have a single layer, it's called simple. And if we have more than one layer, it is called stratified. I remember that because with so many layers, we're going to space. Single layer is simple, more than one is stratified. So these are just the descriptive terms for how many layers do I have. Do I have one or do I have more than one? And I have some descriptive terms for what is the shape of the cell. I have squamous, which is a squished cell. Cuboidal, which, believe it or not, cube-shaped. And I have columnar, which is a column-shaped. So when I am using these classifications, I need to include both how many layers, what shape is the cell. So for example, if I have a single layer of squished cells, I'm going to have simple squamous. if I have multiple layers of cuboidal cells. I would have stratified cuboidal. So I always have to make mention how many layers do I have and what shape are the cells in those layers. So here I have my simple squamous. This is a single layer of squish cells. Simple cuboidal, single layer, because remember, here's my basement. So a single layer of cube-shaped cells. Simple columnar, single layer of column-shaped cells. Here I have a stratified squamous, and they actually get flat. I know you're like, but Miss, I found a cuboidal down here. Now, they actually get flatter and flatter and squishier the greater they go towards the surface. Now, this guy is a guy that we're going to talk about coming up. This is what we call a pseudo-stratified. So remember, stratified means multiple layers. Pseudo means fake. This guy is a faker. Look at this basement membrane. All of his cells have an attachment to the basement membrane, which means even though it appears that he is multiple layers, he's not. He's a single layer. And so he looks like he's stratified, but he's in fact a single. And that's why we call him a pseudo-stratified. So we're going to go through these 6 configurations, the 3 simple and the 3 stratified. And we're just going to discuss some areas that we might see it and some examples of what they do for a job. So the first simple configuration is simple squamous. And as you can imagine, a single layer of super squish cells are going to be very, very fragile, very thin. They're really not going to offer any kind of protection. This is like trying to protect yourself with a piece of tissue paper. It's not going to work. What the role of these cells is to provide easy passage for gases. Because of the configuration, it doesn't offer a lot of resistance. And so we are able to pass gases very easily through. So where are we going to find these? In the lungs. We might have the passage of liquid, which would be helpful where? In the kidneys. So where we need things to pass easily through, that's where we're going to see this simple epithelial. One of the medical terms for this type of epithelium, you guys have all heard this. Oh my goodness, if you watch TV, you know this word, mesothelium. Let me tell you how. If you or a loved one has had a mesothelioma, you may be entitled to compensation. Mesothelium, a mesothelioma, is a tumor of the mesothelium, which is the lining of your chest. I can also see this type of epithelium inside our blood vessels, which makes sense because I'm gonna need to exchange gas. So in the endo or inside layer of my blood vessels, we are going to see this simple squamous epithelium. So here we have, there's in our lung tissue, simple squamous. Now, one of the big problems with this, yes, it is very beneficial for the exchange of gas. But here's the problem, is because it is so delicate, it is a single layer of a very delicate cell, that means that it's not that hard to destroy. And that's the problem that we're seeing right now with this stupid COVID, is that it's going in and it's destroying our cells, or destroying our lungs on a cellular level. And what's happening is our body doesn't have the ability to replicate new healthy cells. All right, so the second type of simple configuration is cuboidal. So cuboidal epithelium are going to be cube-shaped, just like the name says. Single layer, simple. Now, where we are going to see these is where we have a little bit of an added need for absorption. We're going to need to increase the surface area. But instead of adding folds like microvilli, we simply use a bigger cell. That increases my surface area. So some areas that we are going to see this is going to be like in the ovaries, where I'm going to have reproductive hormones being produced, and I'm going to need to secrete or put out into the body. Kidneys, I need to absorb things. I'm going to retain. And so anywhere that I have a little bit of a more needed surface area to do my job, that's going to be where we see this single layer of larger cells, my cuboidal. So here we have our basement membrane, and here we have our single layer. And we're going to see these, as I said, in areas like we need secretion absorption. So like we absorb a lot of stuff in the kidneys. The kidney's job is to hang on to stuff. It's like the hoarder of the body. And so by having this increased surface area of this cube-shaped cell, that allows us much easier to absorb things into the kidney. Now, I know here I have a picture of simple cuboidal, and I know some of you are looking at this like, but Miss Huff, there's 2 layers of cells right there. Because that's how you sound in my head sometimes, especially right now. I'm just picking on you today, Kadeem, because I can. All right, here's what I'm looking at. This is the basement membrane. I'm not doing a very good job of coloring it in, but this is the basement membrane right here. So do y'all see how there is, oops, stop, 1 layer of cells coming out of the basement membrane and 1 layer of cells coming out of the basement membrane? That's what I'm talking about. When we are looking at this cellular configuration, I'm counting the layers from the basement. That's why, even though this appears to have multiple layers, it's still simple, because these are not layers originating out of the same side of the basement. Now, if I had a cell here, then I would have, there's my nucleus. Now I do have stratified. I have multiple cells coming out of the basement. But because this configuration is how it is right here, that is why this is a simple cuboidal. Does that make sense to everybody? Sorry, I have a fly in here and it's driving me insane. Stop. All right, so the third and final simple type of configuration is our simple columnar or column-shaped cells. This is going to be where we need the highest amount of absorption, the highest amount of surface area without getting our microvilli involved. This is going to be found in parts of our intestines. And in fact, if you look at our intestines, they have examples of all 3 simple types of cells depending on where it is and what we need to absorb. We're going to have nutrients that need to be exchanged. Bam! Simple squamous. We're going to have areas that have increased amount of absorption needed. Bam! Cuboidal. And then I'm going to have the areas that have the highest amount of surface area needed. Bam! Simple columnar. This is going to maximize absorption, and we're also going to have our goblet cells be categorized as this simple columnar. Remember our goblet cell, we're not making the noise. Goblet cell, however, is making mucus. Very important in the GI tract. So those are our 3 simple types of epithelial configurations. Marissa has raised her hand. Go ahead.
I'm just a little confused. Like I got a little lost after the whole point of these is like where the I was missing where they're located, and then like what's the whole point? Is it just like only in your lungs and your stomach, or is it just showing the is it showing like the absorption level?
So let me, all right. So when we're talking about these cellular configurations, they're found everywhere in your body. I'm just giving a couple of specific examples. A single layer, this is going to be a squamous. There's my nucleus. Super thin. There we go. Super thin single layer, very easy for things to pass through. It doesn't have a barrier. It's like tissue paper. It's like me trying to stop you from punching me in the face with a piece of tissue paper. What it is going to allow is for things to go back and forth through very easily. Now, there are areas, I'm just going to use our GI tract as an example across the board. Our GI tract has things like nutrients. All right, blah, 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 you get it.
Gastrointestinal.
Nutrients. These nutrients need to be able to pass back and forth very easy through this. It's not even a barrier. My GI tract is going to need to absorb those nutrients. And so we have this and we have this. This is my cuboidal here. This is my columnar. But do you see, just specifically because of the size of the cell, how much more surface area I have? So I've got tons more surface area here and even more surface area here.
So the cubic is like, it's going to be a little bit harder for things to get in, but like the column is going to be even worse for things to try and things.
Yeah, so it's going to provide a barrier, but the other thing that it's going to be able to do is absorb stuff super, super easy. The more surface area I have, the more I'm going to absorb. So if I have an area that I have a very, very high rate of absorption, this is the cell I want because it has the highest amount of surface area. So
that
that's,
means it'll absorb nutrients?
Yeah, nutrients, things that your body's created. Yeah, so, and using it just in our GI tract as our example, these three types of cells really just represent what kind of absorption am I looking at. This being very, very delicate, it's not even so much absorption as it's just allowing stuff to pass and be exchanged. This is going to be far more likely for like gas exchange. Now you can do some nutrients, but very, very small molecules. Here I have greater nutrient absorption and here I have the greatest. And so it's really just going to be determined where is it and how much absorption properties do I need to see. And that's where we see a transition of all three of these cells in the GI tract, just based on what am I trying to do. And so yes, Haley, you're absolutely right. We are going to see this epithelial, some of these cells everywhere in your body. And it's just going to be determined by the protection layer and what is the goal. So the more absorptive powers I need, now keep in mind this is all simple. We've only been doing simple here. Simple. So these are all single layers, but depending on where I am, that will determine how much surface area do I need. And so we see these everywhere. I'm just using the intestines as a single example of where you would see actually all three of these. All right, so holy smokes, time flies when we are having fun.
Oh, dang.
I know, holy smokes. Okay, so just a quick recap. I will be having a 4 o'clock tutoring session today. It is not mandatory. Stop on by. We will tutor first for A and P, but then some of you that came last week, you know, I will help tutor you in whatever other class. Although if you're having your, what you said, it was 75 minutes for your test?
Yeah.
And it starts at 3?
Yes.
All right, so that means that I'm gonna start your tutoring session at 4:30, and that will give you enough time to finish your test. I'll see what I can do about it. I'll see what I can do. Can't promise anything, but we'll start the tutoring session at 4:30 after your test. Your quizam in here will open tomorrow at 3. It will close Wednesday at 7, and your test questions will be due on Wednesday. So, comments, questions, concerns? All right, so what I need you guys also to try and do is start